AskReddi by Vegetable Body 8412. Who is the scariest nuclear threat today and why? Mad has made the threat pretty low tbh. Anyone who uses it pretty much guarantees their country is wiped off the map. Unless a leader and all his generals are suicidal, this is unlikely to happen. I think the final nuclear annihilation is going to be a gradual thing. It will start with tactical nukes being utilized on hard targets. These would be relatively low-yield tactical devices, none above 20 to 40 kilotons in yield. If the international community doesn't immediately retaliate, then it will become normalized. Eventually we would witness a power creep with more and more powerful nuclear devices being utilized in an expanded capacity. MAD provides a high degree of safety between warring countries, but non-state actors with access to nukes and no permanent location state association are the scariest possibility to me. My thing is, Putin seems like the type to take the world with him when he knows it's over, especially if he's dying without the respect of his country. Edit. Let's think about the North Korean people. The biggest point of control is their worldview. Not many things stopping them from accepting the risk. India or Pakistan? Probably, because they are the two most likely countries to use them, and it will be on each other. On the other hand, they have fought several small-scale wars that did not escalate to nuclear use. Me on the toilet after all the dairy I consumed last night. Ice cream party, A. Gojira. Now I can see the whales. Working in missile defense field, saw a lot of troubling things. Russia. What are the odds if someone were to launch a handful of nukes, say a dozen? Let's say it can be done and someone in Russia decides to nuke the US. Could we shoot them down? Also, I know you probably don't even know, and if you did you can't say, but you think we have space-based anti-missile weapons? Pakistan. Pakistan by far. Their economy is tanking. They average a coup about every 20 years, not to mention all the failed coups. The military takes control of the country whenever it sees fit, and there are at least 50 active known terrorist groups operating within their borders, many with links to the government including ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Oh, and by the way, their greatest geopolitical enemy is right next door with an active border dispute that flares up into violence every 5 years or so. Any answer but Pakistan is an agenda post. They are the geopolitical equivalent of a 4-year-old with a gun. Overrun with militant Islam, unstable governments, ramshackle military, broad swaths of the country essentially ungoverned. An Islamic nuke is bad enough, but one in an impoverished state held together with imported duct tape is a nightmare. It's a miracle some band of jackasses haven't driven a hillox through a fence and stolen one, because that's probably all it would take to defeat their security. All of them are just as scary as they all have enough to destroy everything. Nuclear isn't the primary threat. Bioweapons are far and away worse than nuclear. Smallpox is the real threat. Only 2 known samples still exist worldwide. We had been trying to inoculate and eradicate it since the 1700s. We actually did eradicate it by the mid-1980s worldwide. That's entirely the problem. My sister, born in '79, has been vaccinated. I was born in '87 and was not. I missed the cutoff by a year or 2. My sister and others her in age grouping are mostly beyond being able to reproduce naturally. A smallpox outbreak would devastate the under 40 population worldwide. Gen A, most millennials and Gen Z would be dead in weeks. Zennials and Zers would most likely be fine, but they would have to repopulate the planet in their 40-50s. Sure, some of our younger military would survive because they are still vaccinated. We do have vaccines stockpiled, but getting them out and getting people to take them would be a nightmare in itself. Smallpox. 4th Indo-Pak War. I'd be less worried about war and more about Pakistan army just straight up selling nukes given their economy. They've done something like that with North Korea before, so. War is long and hard to sell to a hungry, dissatisfied population. A dirty bomb in a suitcase. Pakistan, because of the way they cheerfully shared key nuclear technologies with North Korea, Iran and Libya. The Pakistanis finally removed Abdul Qadir Khan from heading up their nuclear program, but only after he had shared things like advanced centrifuge designs that he had stolen from Urenco and uranium processing techniques with some of the worst people on the planet. The Pakistani government claimed to have been entirely unaware that he was running a nuclear bazaar for years using government planes and bank accounts. And then they pardoned him. There is also a genuine threat of their own weapons being used. Not only because the country itself is politically unstable, but it has been unable to achieve an economic path to prosperity unlike its mortal enemy, neighboring India, which is rapidly heading towards superpower status. Zach from the Strain. Little fucking ignorant created a nuclear holocaust because he didn't like that his dad killed his vampire mom. That kid still fills me with rage. Honestly, still Russia. Their arsenal probably isn't well maintained, but it only takes one. Per Reuters, Russia has 5,883 nuclear warheads. Around 1,400 of those Russian warheads are retired but probably still intact. 2,815 are in reserve and around 1,674 are deployed strategic warheads. The United States has around 1,670 deployed strategic nuclear warheads. If we assume a worst-case scenario, for Russia, that only 10% of those deployed warheads are actually fit for launch, that's still 167 nuclear blasts in a world that only needs a single launch to descend into a mad scenario. And, as a nation, they are not entirely unlikely to fail. What happens when a guy like Putin has his back up against the wall? My money says that dude would launch. Pakistan has nukes and the country has been actively falling apart more each year. Shouldn't be long before one of those gets sold. Pakistan, and whoever has stolen nukes. Pakistan, India, China, Kashmir region, three-way disputed region. India has missile silos, China has bombers and everything else. Pakistan has a bunch of nukes on mobile missile launchers rolling in convoys around the region. The issues is not that Pakistan would launch, but they are the most susceptible to takeover of convoy, so either a terrorist, or another country not wanting the blame, due to mad. A suicidal proxy willing to launch from their territory. Meh, nobody will nuke nobody, this is my opinion. Iran. They either completely fund different terrorist groups, some are more like armies, or provide significant money and other stuff and loathe Israel and the US. Their nuclear program is a question in present or near future as they could either directly attack Israel or give nukes to some terrorist group. So, the chances of either Israel or Iran striking each other is pretty high. Their nuclear capacity is low though, which diminishes the overall threat. If Iran or one of their proxies detonate a nuclear weapon against any nation, the fallout will be catastrophic, but the impact won't be world-ending. It will be Iran-ending however. The powers that be are going to be absolutely bloodthirsty and it will take all of about 15 minutes to figure out where the uranium was likely sourced from and who is responsible. The scariest threat is Russia disintegrating as the precursor to the end of the Ukraine war and their very large, presumably operational nuclear weapon stockpile falling into the hands of dozens of breakaway regions and arms dealers and terrorists before the Security Council can authorize an intervention that secures known nuclear facilities. In that scenario, the world has to hunt down fissile material which is likely shielded without the ability to hold anion. My father worked in intelligence throughout most of the Cold War and he says 3 times it came close. Cuban crisis, assassination of JFK, and a time in the 80s when a miscommunication on the Russian side as response to a NATO exercise nearly set off a nuclear attack. A rogue state player is probably a bigger threat today. The Doomsday Clock is a decent website that monitors current trends. Any country that deeply relies on religion for their moral compass. Israel. They are quite likely to erase Tehran, Beirut and Damascus if push comes to shove. They have at least 200 nuclear weapons. 100%. They have an official policy of nuclear ambiguity. There have never been any inspections or treaties. It's a mystery how many they have. When an Israeli whistleblower tried to expose this to a British newspaper, Mossad lured him to Italy, drugged and abducted him and brought him to Israel for a sham trial, and he was imprisoned for 18 years, 11 of which were in solidarity confinement. Israel has a fanatical right-wing government which is openly using genocidal rhetoric. They are by far the greatest nuclear threat in the world right now. Amaznawi.